Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us today. Last one of the afternoon, so hopefully we can keep you awake, keep things moving. And today our group is going to be talking about driving down fatalities. Today's presenters are going to be Bob Clausen from District 1 Materials, Jennifer Graffner from the Bureau of Data Collection, myself from the Center of Bureau of Materials, and Tony Wagner, also from the Center of the Bureau of Materials. So our problem statement is a little dense. All of you that have a handout, you might want to read along. So forgive me for reading off the screen. For the last 10 years, Illinois has averaged close to 1,000 vehicular crash fatalities each year. In the last few years, fatalities have been on the rise. The top 4 contributing factors to these fatalities are exceeding authorized speed limit, safe speed for conditions, failure to reduce speed to avoid a crash route, improper lane usage, failing to yield right-of-way, and under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or had been drinking route. The bulk of these fatalities occur on state and U.S. routes, city streets, and county and township roads. By innovating and fine-tuning existing and proposed programs, the goal is to reverse the trend and reduce traffic fatalities that occur as a result of avoidable causes. So I just updated this number about 10 minutes ago. It actually increased 6 from yesterday when I had first updated it. This year, so far, we're at 990. So if we've been averaging about 1,000 per year, we're pretty much right on the bubble for how we've been the last few years. As we all know, we've seen it at least once today, IDOT's goal of driving zero fatalities to a reality has been a big push this administration. We've done this a couple different ways. Back in the spring of this year, a traffic safety task force was begun that drew people from all over the Department of Transportation in different areas, using their areas of expertise to try to find ways to reduce traffic fatalities. And this October, just a couple months ago, there was a safety summit held here in Springfield where a lot of these issues were also discussed. So for our presentation today, we broke it up into 4 different modules. Some are informative, some have some ideas of things we can do. We're going to talk about crash coding and statistics. We're going to talk about driver education. We're going to talk about technology. And finally, we're going to talk about outreach and communications. So to kick this off, we're going to have Jennifer come up and talk about crash coding and statistics.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Graffman. I work in the Bureau of Data Collection. Imagine it is a Saturday morning in December. The weather is perfect for sledding. It just snowed. And your kids have been bugging you all week to go sledding. So everybody gets ready, you load up in the car to head to the park. In van, a crash has occurred. They happen in an instant. Fatality statistics. In 1980, 1,994 people died due to a motor vehicle crash. In 1990, 1,589 people died. 1,418 people died in the year 2000. In 2010, the number decreased to 927. In 2015, 1,011 people. Why the decrease in 2010, you might ask? We can speculate that possibly the Safe Driving campaign that was aimed at teens that began in 2007 and 2008 may have had something to do with this. Also, another speculation is the sharp rise in gas prices at that time. So the average between 2000 and 2015 is 1,162.9 deaths a year, an average of 3.2 per day. This is a serious problem. One death is too many. from the coroner's office. It might be from the Illinois State Police. It might even be from a newspaper article. Once the Bureau of Data Collection is notified, a case file is started. Statistics do take time to compile, and there are many reasons for this. One is the Bureau is short on manpower, as I'm sure everyone can probably say their bureau where they work is short on manpower. The Bureau of Data Collection is no different. Also, it takes time because the actual report needs to be received before we can begin the process. The statute requires that crash reports be turned into IDOT within 10 days. Sometimes they're submitted and received within 10 days. Sometimes it might be 10 months. You just never know. 100% electronic reporting is hopefully coming soon. Currently, we are at 81% of law enforcement agencies in the state of Illinois who are submitting electronically. There is legislation out there, and hopefully by January of 2020, all agencies will be electronically reporting. So how the stats are calculated? Once the report is received by the Bureau of Data Collection, it starts the process of being worked by various units. There is a data, if it's a non-fatal report, it goes to a data entry unit, and they do the data entry part and the location part. If it's a fatal report, it goes straight to the fatal desk, and one person is responsible for both of those. Next, it'll go to the fatality analyst reporting system, also known as FARS analysts, who are compiling the information in the system for the feds. So, as a reconstructionist, they're looking at the 5 W's, the who, what, where, why. Why did it happen? What caused the crash to happen? Who was at fault? So, did someone fail to yield at the intersection? Did somebody cross over the center line? Did we have a distracted driver? Was there an impaired driver? So there was a reason for the crash occurring. Could the crash have been avoided? We always say yes. So there is a disconnect between IDOT bureaus and districts and how they interact with Illinois State Police and Secretary of State. There's so many things that the different agencies are doing independently but not communicating together. If we pooled our resources, wouldn't we go further? So one thing we talked about is how can we improve data collection to help focus on problem areas. We talked about the Illinois State Police Reconstruction Unit and IDOT crash investigators or staff working together and assisting, training, teaching officers. Surprising how many crash reports come in with information wrong on them, and the Bureau of Data Collection needs to do corrections on those reports so that the information can be entered in so that our statistics are correct. collection where they all need to come. And we think the district office would share those or send a copy to the Bureau of Data Collection. It rarely happens. So we just don't communicate that well together. Why we chose our area of focus. Fatality numbers are unsettling. Reducing fatalities is a high priority of the current administration. And most people have been affected by a traffic-related death, or they know someone who has. We want to help educate and we want to draw attention to the problem. Again, roadway fatalities are avoidable. Often, if we have someone who is not wearing a seatbelt and they are ejected out of the vehicle, if they would have been wearing that seatbelt and stayed inside the vehicle as it rolled, they would have survived. What's some other causes? A lot of distracted driving, alcohol use, or drug use, impaired driving. And another thing that we talked about in our group is needing to have strong leadership from the top to the bottom. Someone that is leading the mission of driving traffic-related fatalities to zero. We need to have someone at the top level who's leading the effort and who is directly responsible for this mission. We think that would be very beneficial. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Bob. Thank you.
I'm Bob Clausen, and I'm going to be talking to you about driver education. So why is it important to talk about driver education when discussing reducing fatalities in Illinois? Illinois averages over 1,000 traffic-related fatalities every year. And of those fatalities, 20 to 25% occur in an age group between 16 and 25. This becomes a large and important area to focus on when trying to reach the state's initiative of driving fatalities to zero. Now, in this age group, the main causes of the fatalities are attributed to a lack of experience, poor decision-making, and improper behaviors like reckless driving, aggressive driving, distracted driving, and speeding. These are all preventable causes. We would hope that driving education program is focusing on giving new drivers the skills they need to develop safe driving behaviors and become responsible drivers. This would help to reduce the total number of fatalities in this age group. And since these are skills that they will carry with them for the rest of their lives, we would hope that it also reduces fatalities in other areas as well. Let's talk about the driver education program in Illinois. Now, it used to be the old way, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. You would turn 15 and you would get your blue slip or your learner's permit. You would have classroom education, take behind the wheel. You drive around with your parents for experience. And when you turned 16, you went to the DMV and you got your license. So from 15 to 16, that amounts to about 1 year of training before you are a licensed driver. Illinois has taken steps to adopt what is called a Graduated Driver's Licensing Program, a GDL. The GDL consists of a stair-step reduction in restrictions and penalties and an increase in responsibility. At age 15, you get your permit, and you have classroom education behind the wheel, you drive with your parents, but there are a number of restrictions and penalties placed on drivers in this age group. Restrictions such as you have a limited number of occupants that you're allowed to have in your car to help reduce distractions. You are not permitted to drive after a certain hour at night. You're not permitted to drive before a certain hour in the morning. And you're not allowed to use electronic devices, even if they have hands-free. When you reach 16, you become a licensed driver, but all of those restrictions and penalties remain. When you reach the age of 18, the restrictions are removed, but there are increased penalties for infractions such as moving violations that prevent you from moving through the driver's education program. When you reach the age of 21, you become a fully licensed driver. So between age 15 and 21, that's 6 years of training, which is much better than the old one. So our group set out, looking at the program, trying to determine how we can make it better. And in doing that, we asked ourselves several questions. How can we reach drivers more effectively? How can we change the existing driving program to give drivers more takeaways? We also asked, are we reaching everyone? Are all the resources that are available in the driver's education program readily available to everyone that needs them? And lastly, we asked, should we change the system? Should we increase restrictions, negative reinforcement? Or should we provide incentives for those who are following the rules, giving positive reinforcement? Okay, let's look at each of these in a little more detail. Reaching student drivers more effectively. Trying to give them more takeaways and make the current driving program more effective. I want to know what we could change, what we could add that might do that. One thing we thought that might be a benefit would be to provide a phone app. The phone app would be able to help them track their goals and habits in real time. They would be able to track positive behaviors like how long they've been driving, how far they've driven, what times of the day they've been driving. One of the requirements of the permit phase is that you log a certain number of hours at night. This could help them track their progress. We could also track negative behaviors, such as speeding in certain zones, or coming to a complete stop at an intersection. The app would also be able to provide alerts. As I mentioned, young drivers are not allowed to drive after a certain hour at night or before a certain hour in the morning. The phone could provide an alert that they are approaching that time, or could tell them they're already in that time and they're not permitted to drive. The app would also be a benefit to both student drivers and their parents. At the end of the permit phase, parents are required to sign off that their children have met all the requirements of the program before they can go to the DMV. It can help them track their children's progress. We also thought it would be a benefit to increase the number of peer-to-peer programs, especially those focused on driver education. We feel that students often learn very well from each other. And when you make it personal, it's something that they choose to be in, they invest more in it. They put more into it, they get more out of it. We can also provide scholarship opportunities for those willing to take on leadership roles in our programs. We also thought the creation of an advanced driving program would be beneficial. Now, Illinois has been teaming with Ford in the Driving Skills for Life program for the last 12 years. This program is great. It provides driving training beyond what you would normally get in a standard driver education program. They have classroom education. They have behind-the-wheel training with a professional driver. The problem is that it's limited to a small number of participants. For example, the class that was offered in DuPage County was limited to 231 students. If the state was able to develop their own program, it could garner support from auto manufacturers, insurance companies, driving clubs, anyone who would want to participate in these programs. It would be a great benefit to students to take an extra step beyond what is normally taught in driver education. second question that we had wanted to answer was, are we reaching everyone? Is there a way that we would be able to make the resources in the driver education program more accessible to everyone that needs them? This would include not only the student drivers, but parents and teachers as well. We thought one way of doing this would be to create an online classroom, somewhere we could download all of the information that's available. Driving manuals, online courses, videos, and other driving materials. We could also tie this back into the peer-to-peer program and allow students to create their own videos and upload them, or upload their own documents. We also thought that one way of helping to reach everyone would be to create a rideshare program for people that might not have access to a car or might not have access to their parents' time. It would help them get the behind-the-wheel training that is so critical in gaining experience when you're learning how to drive. The last question we had asked is about changing the system. Is there a need to change the system? Should we add negative reinforcement or positive reinforcement? Should there be more penalties and more restrictions? Should we provide some kind of a benefit to those who are doing well and following the rules? The GDL program was initiated in 2008 in Illinois. So it's been around for 10 years, and it's long enough to evaluate if it's effective. In that amount of time, the fatalities amongst young drivers has dropped significantly, but it's still not at zero. We don't believe that there is any perfect system, but we should continue to evaluate and adjust the system we have by adding things that we think might be an improvement or removing things that we don't think are working. We need to provide the best education that we can give to students while they're learning. I listened to a radio program called Suspense that was on in the 1940s through the 60s, and in one of the episodes, the authorities are looking for a couple of teen drivers that were involved in a hit-and-run fatality. And in the end of the episode, the announcer says that an improperly handled vehicle is as dangerous as a loaded gun. And we think that this is a good analogy for how seriously we should be taking the driver education program. We need to provide the best program that we can so that students can become safe and responsible, and hopefully will reduce fatalities, as I said, in the young group, but also in all age groups. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Tony, who's going to talk about technology.
All right, thanks, Bob. My name is Tony Wagner. I work for the Central Bureau of Materials, and I'm going to talk today about technology. And I've got a few areas of focus I'm going to go over, which are mapping and tracking technology, vehicle innovations, work zone speed management, and material innovations. So the first topic is mapping, tracking technology. This would include your apps for your cell phones. And you use state-owned GPS units and data from your cell phone providers for the mapping. So your apps for your cell phones. I'm going to put a list up here. Bob had alluded to some habits that our teen drivers are, well, all of us exhibit. Aggressive driving, speeding, not stopping completely. So this is, by far, this isn't a complete list of all the apps available that help track that. But I'll touch base with a couple of them to let you know. The Lifesaver app, that one, let me back up. Most of these you have to turn on when you get in your car and start your trip. The Lifesaver, it blocks everything on your phone. You can't receive phone calls or text messages. The TrueMotion Family, that you set up with your family members, and it gives a report card on how you drive, how each one in the family drives. So parents can keep track of their kids to make sure that they're not driving aggressively. The Mojo, that one pairs with Amazon.com, and after driving so many miles without any incidents or aggressiveness or speeding, you can qualify for a gift card from Amazon. The AT&T Drive mode, that's the only app that automatically turns on when you exceed 25 miles an hour. And that one also will send out, if you receive a text, it'll do an automated message saying that the driver's driving, and they'll text when they get done. Same with the phone calls will go straight to voicemail. The Parkify, that was just not necessarily a safe driving app, but it was just one that I thought was interesting. Geolocation for cars. The state-owned GPS units. So when we talked earlier about the autonomous vehicles, with the first presentation, the state-owned GPS units would be handy for mapping out our roads and our signs. You could use them for mapping and cataloging all the signs in all the districts in all the state. But when you do that, you need timely updates for major changes. So if you had an accident on the road and you're missing a sign, I don't know what the policy now is, you get X amount of days to get it replaced, that would have to be sped up. And then you would also need a centralized storage of all that information. But all of it would go towards the automated or the autonomous vehicles. Your data from your cell phone providers for mapping. So there's two apps that really use this. Google Maps is an automated mapping system. It's based off your habits, where you go, when you go there. Every morning my phone tells me it's 37 minutes to work, and light traffic. I've got an obligation on a Monday night. It tells me how long it's going to take to get there. It's just one of those. So the information's there for them. The Waze app is a social app. That's when you log in, and users are responsible for putting information in. So if there's a traffic jam or an accident or anything, while they're sitting in traffic, they can input that into the Waze app, and then other Wazers would be notified. And then I put Life 360 on here. It's more of a report card app, but this is one that my family uses. My daughter just turned 17, and when she's coming and going to school, she leaves for school after I leave, and she gets home before I get home. But the Life 360 sends me notices, so I know she left home all right. I know she arrived at school all right. It sends me a report card saying that she drove 27 miles an hour to school. She drives pretty slow, but I live in a small town, so it's okay with that. But it's also, I put it on under the mapping because, I live in rural Illinois. If she were to hit a deer and she got a hold of me, she wouldn't have to. She's good with directions, but she's not good at knowing where she's at. I can just go and it'll tell me this is where she's at, this is how long it takes to get there. So that's why I put it in with the map. And I thought that was a pretty cool feature. So we're going to talk a little bit about advanced vehicle technology. So you talked about snow plows and the heads-up display. That would be phenomenal to go to. Well, I thought it was pretty interesting that in 1996, they talked about putting magnetic paint down on the highway for striping, and then having sensors in the snowplow trucks so that you could stay in the lanes. So 22 years later, we're heads-up display. I thought that was pretty incredible. I really appreciated hearing that this morning. So we also, like I said, I'm not going to talk about the autonomous vehicles because there's all the different companies have their way of doing things and how proprietary systems, but most of them use sensors and cameras and shortwave radio. There's a lot of different features for that. But as a DOT, we can help come up with standardization for requirements for those vehicles. So they may have their system of how they want to do it, but we need to team with them to get that done. How can Illinois incentivize? We can provide tax breaks for auto manufacturers for creating the autonomous vehicles, or I hate to say semi-autonomous, because I like to drive. You can reduce license costs and reduce insurance costs as well. So what's IDOT without some speed zone or work zone speed management? So there's a couple ways we can get cars to slow down in the work zone. We got the automated enforcement. Right now there's 2 vans. They were out of service for a while, but they're back at the work zone, and cars speed through, then you get a ticket. You have your law enforcement presence, an actual police officer sitting in the work zone. Your speed advisory system. Your speed advisory system are the little miles per hour sign that's sitting on at the entrance of the work zones. It says you're supposed to drive 55, and it will flash. If you're going over 10 above it, it'll flash and say slow down. But it'll tell you what your speed is so you can go the correct speed to the work zone. The variable speed limit system. That one, as far as I know, in Illinois we don't use that. But that would be sensors at the beginning of the work zone and at the end, and they monitor the congestion going through the work zone. And if traffic gets backed up too much, they will increase the speed limit slightly to get the cars through, so you don't have any rear-end collisions. And then there's always a combination of all of those. Which probably would be the best system for most work zones. And I work materials, so I got to talk about material innovations. That's where my bread and butter. So rumble strips. You know, on the interstate, there's rumble strips on all the edge lines. But on rural highways where there's high crossover rates, we can have a center line rumble strip. And it's enough to wake you up, let you know that you're crossing over the line. We also have inline pavement markers. You see this, I've seen this mostly around big cities here in the state, where you have 55 and an arrow going to the left, and 72 with an arrow going to the right. It keeps the driver from having to look up. Your eyes are on the road. It helps you keep your focus of what you're supposed to be doing. The contrast lines, it's pretty simple. It's just black paint on the outside of the white or yellow line. It helps you see the line during the day. It doesn't matter at night. You have the glass beads to see the line there. Then we also have the inline route markers, which is your bicycle paths. They're green, Champaign, right around the U of I. There's quite a bit of that. I know they're really pushing that, and hopefully that'll take off throughout the state. And then reflective sheeting. Reflective sheeting, for as simple as it is, there's a lot of technology involved in it. And they're talking about embedding information into the signage. So the stop sign, it'd be invisible to the naked eye, but the infrared lights that sensors or whatever you have on your autonomous vehicles would be able to read that sign and know that the GPS coordinates that you took earlier, that's where you're at. It would be a verification for your vehicle, and help location, different things like that. And then I've got a few examples of some of the innovations that I know there's a few of the high friction surface treatment safe lane. That's not one that's in our code that I know of, but that's, as the weather turns bad, the chemicals in the road and the material come out, and it helps with the de-icing and different things like that. And the solar roadways, I thought was interesting. On bridge decks, they put the heating elements in the bridge deck and then put solar panels alongside the road. So, you know, in the winter, when the weather turns bad, the energy from the sun, you could store it during the day, and then at night it would come out or at whatever temperature and help keep the ice off the bridges and make them so they're not slick. And then dynamic signage. Dynamic signage it's popping up all over the interstate. I think it's great. It's just a big message board, you know, letting you know that there's construction ahead. There's a lane closed for whatever reason. They put amber alerts up there. So there's that's a great feature, and it helps keep people's eyes on the road. So looking to the future. Some of the things we need to do is to continue, as IDOT, we need to continue to encourage industry to come up with their new innovations. And we need to be open to the new ideas, not just because it's new, you know, don't be scared of it. We need to be open to it. And then as an entity, we need to continue research. Because there's always something out there, there's always a way to get better or safer. So those are the things we need to do. So I'm going to ask Clay to come up and talk about outreach and communication.
Thank you, Tony. A lot of the things we've discussed so far in our presentation, a lot of concrete things. I'm going to go a little bit more esoteric. I'm going to kind of get the feelies on a little bit. Everyone's in such a hurry these days. You've got to get to church. You've got to get your kid to baseball practice. You don't have time for that person that's driving 45 in front of you in a 55. So how do we get our messages through the noise of daily life? How do we communicate effectively? How do we get people to take ownership of their experience? Because after all, you have enough to worry about when you're driving your own vehicle, let alone worry about the guy in the lane right next to you, hoping he doesn't try to change lanes and run into you. And this is a little bit of a controversial statement, but driving is a privilege, not a right. We have to be educated, we have to be licensed to do it. It's not something you get for free. A lot of people don't look at it that way. There have been a lot of campaigns out over the years. You're going to see a bunch of them pop up on the screen here. Some are from IDOT, some are federal, some are from other states. I could probably fill 2 screens with the ones that I found. Are these really effective? When that commercial comes on TV, you know, during Wheel of Fortune, do you pay attention? Or do you just change the channel? When we're thinking about our driving habits, you know, changing is hard. It's easier said than done. I tried to think back at when I got my first smartphone, and when I said, there's no way I'm going to send a text message while I'm driving my car, to the time when I said, oh, I can just reply real quick. I wonder how long that period, I don't honestly recall. But getting people to stop doing that, this day and age, when everyone driving down the road is doing this, it's going to be tough. This is a sobering statistic. This came from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. In Illinois, seatbelt use, I'd say is pretty common. I have a hard time getting in a car without putting a seatbelt on. It just doesn't feel right to me. It's a force of habit. There's been a lot of push in Illinois over the years for people to buckle up. But 50% of passenger vehicle occupants killed in crashes are unbelted. 50%. In 2018, for a simple piece of cloth you can just put over your lap and over your shoulder. It takes 1 second to do. That kind of blew me away. Because really, if you think about it, safety on the road is a shared responsibility. It's not just one person's responsibility. government has a piece of the pie. We're the ones that make the laws and the statutes to tell people how they need to behave when they're on the roadways. Auto manufacturers have a bit to say because they're making the vehicles that go on the road. And how about the systems manufacturers for those systems that go into the automobiles? And then, of course, all of us, the motoring public, everybody that's on the road every day. We all have a piece of the pie to share the responsibility to reduce traffic fatalities. So a few things that we can do to talk about reducing fatalities. We've talked about education. We've talked about technology. I'm kind of going to touch on a few things here. As far as continuing education, so not what Bob talked about, where you're licensing people. Continuing education, people like you and me. I've been driving a long time. I'm 43. I don't even remember. I remember my driver's ed teacher, and I don't remember anything else about it. It's not just for kids. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of corporate programs. There's a lot of new technologies out there. So how can we use, let's say, corporate programs to help reduce fatalities? How can we pair with and have partnerships with these companies? Well, Bob mentioned the Ford Driving Skills for Life program. It's a really cool program. It's mainly aimed at young drivers that have only been driving 1-2 years, something like that. And it gives them advanced techniques to help them become a better and safer driver. I don't know if anybody here belongs to AAA. AAA has a lot of resources. They have drivers training on their website. They have a ton of different things that you can do that are actually focused in certain areas. So if you're worried about motorcycle safety or bicycle safety, there's a lot of resources on the AAA website. One of the ones I thought was really, really interesting, AARP. They have a smart driver program. And this is actually really cool. It's something that I had never really thought about, but we have a rapidly aging society right now, baby boomers. There's going to be a large increase in senior citizens in the next decade. I asked my dad if he was aware of this. He's 67. Him and my mother are AARP members. He was not aware of this program. But then he's kind of anti-internet, so it didn't surprise me. But this smart driver program is actually to help seniors adjust their driving due to the physical and cognitive effects of aging. So it's actually specifically focused to help senior citizens learn how to react better as they deal with their loss of eyesight, loss of reaction time, things like that. I thought that was awesome. And another way that we can kind of help out in this range is new technology. So personal experience, this is not a commercial for Subaru, but my wife and I purchased a 2018 Subaru Outback this past year. Really interesting. One of the things that attracted my wife to it, because this is technically her car, is the safety technology that's built into the vehicle. And when it comes to get new safety technology, what do you need to do? You need to kind of test it out a little bit. So you need to test some limits. And she is a little hesitant to do that. I never am. So we'd go out on a trip, and I would try to see how some of these things work. So it's got what is called the eyesight system, which is stereo cameras built in right alongside the rear view mirror. And it's looking at like a 150-degree view of the road in front of you. And so part of its capabilities are adaptive cruise control. It will have warnings when you're too close to an obstruction. It's also got sensors built into it that will alert you when there's cars in your blind spots. So a good example is the adaptive cruise control. I wanted to test it out. So we were in a traffic jam, believe it or not, on Route 4 north of Lebanon in the middle of a cornfield. There was a bunch of grain trucks backed up. And it was like, it was literally like a half a mile long. I was like, it's never like this when we go this way. So I was like, I'm gonna try this thing out. And so my wife had like the phantom brake thing going on, like while I was doing it. But I just let the car do its thing. And so basically as the truck in front of us would slow down, the car would actually slow down. The car applies brakes. It doesn't just coast. It will actually apply the brakes. And then when the truck in front of me stopped, our car stopped. When the truck in front of us started moving again, all I had to do was tap the accelerator, take my foot off, and the car would start going and then maintain a set distance between our car and the truck in front. And I just thought that was awesome. Why would everybody not want that? Especially if you live in an urban area where you're in traffic all the time. I just thought it was great. And it also has a correction system that if you start to wander out of your lane, the cameras can see if they can see where the lines are. it will show you on the heads-up display. And then if you start to drift a little bit, it'll kind of let you know. And then if you get a little bit too much further out from that, it'll gently correct you back in. And it's a little disconcerting at first, but after a while, it's kind of like, you know, that's a good thing, because sometimes you get a little tired, you're talking to somebody in the car, you wander a little bit, and it kind of bumps you back in. So when it comes to new technologies, perceptions really do matter. I'm very receptive to this kind of stuff. My wife, not so much, even though it's her car. And now that we've kind of messed with it a little bit, she's more comfortable with it. But with these kind of things, you really do have to get used to it. You have to try it out. You have to be sold on the technology. And then you can't talk about technology without talking about, as I've mentioned before, senior citizens. This picture here is Papa Eo. This is my wife's maternal grandfather, Etheridge Orville Tharp. This picture was taken in 2015 on his 103rd birthday. Believe it or not, he was still driving. He was still driving at that point. He lived in Christopher, Illinois, so he basically only had to go from his house, maybe to the Dollar General, which was like 3 blocks away, and back to his house. So he didn't have to go far, but he was still driving. When I think of like anti-technology people, he's one of the first people that comes to my mind, because he didn't like their cable box, he didn't like their DVD player, he didn't like their computer, he didn't do email, he didn't do cell phones. He flushed his hearing aids down the toilet multiple times because they were like whistling and he didn't like the way that they were working. So he just, right in the toilet, flushed them away. So when I say perceptions matter, for senior citizens especially, because we just have, like I said, an accelerated aging population. There's going to be a ton of baby boomers out there. So we need to get this kind of stuff out to them so they can be comfortable with it. We need to have outreach to senior citizens. Like say in places like senior centers and retirement centers, where companies maybe can come in and bring their technology and let people try it out. Take them for a test drive, let them drive it, let them see how it works, so that they're not afraid of it. Because you take that fear away, and the adoption rates would most likely increase. So in order to adopt a lot of these technologies, you're going to have incentives, because they are still a bit on the expensive side sometimes. And it can take sometimes 20 years or more to adopt new technologies as standard equipment on current models. So here's a couple of good examples. ABS, automatic braking system, and airbags. Airbags were first developed actually in the late 1960s, but you didn't see them as standard equipment on automobiles until maybe the mid-1980s. So that's something that you can see right there, and think about the number of lives that an airbag has saved. But in the 1960s, you could probably barely get somebody to put a seatbelt on. And you're going to tell them you're going to put an air pillow in their car that's going to save them in case they get in a crash. You know, it's going to be, it would have been hard to sell them at that point. But then 20, 25 years later, the price of the technology comes down to the point where it's feasible to put it in a vehicle and people can accept it because it's more reliable and easier to come upon. And another thing to think about is the production of trucks and SUVs is increasing. I mean, it's been in the news a lot lately. Any of you who have a Ford might know that Ford is discontinuing production of all of their cars except for the Mustang, which is a good choice. It's a nice car. But they're going to be making more Escapes and more whatever SUVs they make. Which, to me, bigger vehicles, more bigger vehicles on the roads equal bigger crashes, which equal bigger injuries, which is just going to cost more money down the line. In some of our discussions when we were planning this presentation, Bob mentioned that he actually pays more on his insurance for his SUV because it's larger and has the potential to cause more damage if an accident were to occur. So that's kind of logical in my mind. And this just makes better safety technology even that more important because we have to protect ourselves. So a few things that are going on right now. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has a few initiatives. A couple of the big ones. They have a vehicle safety program that's currently looking into the reliability and security of the complex systems that are installed in cars. They're also looking at cybersecurity. There's been stuff in the news the past few years about cars being hacked via Wi-Fi or other ways. And then they're also looking at assessing new and emerging technologies. A couple things that they've really pushed for. The emergency braking, automatic emergency braking. They actually have gotten commitments from many of the major automotive manufacturers to make this standard on automobiles by 2022. So that's where the car, if it detects an obstruction, the car will automatically apply the brakes to try to avoid the collision. That's a big deal. And also one that's a little more controversial, the driver alcohol detection system for safety. So this would be where the car, it's almost like an automatic breathalyzer, but not necessarily using your breath. It would be a system that when you get into the car, it would either analyze your breath or would have something built into, like, say, the start button of the car, that when you touch the button, it uses contact with your skin and is able to see what your blood alcohol content is. And then it would either allow you to start the car or not start the car. Now, this technology is still not quite there. It's something they're working on, but it's also pretty controversial. A lot of people don't want that kind of controls in their car if it doesn't have to be there. Especially if you're not a drinker, why would I want to pay for that if I don't even use alcohol? But that could save a lot of lives. In fiscal year 17, the NHTSA budgeted $35 million out of approximately $900 million of their budget for research and analysis. That's only about 4% of their total budget. Not a whole lot. Most of it goes to highway traffic safety grants, which are very important. I'm sure Illinois gets a lot of money from those for traffic safety initiatives. But is this enough? I mean, 4% of the total budget. And if we're going to be trying to keep people safe, and we want to invest in technology, are we really going to get it with 4% of the budget? Another one that I thought was interesting, the U.S. Council for Automotive Research. Now, this is a group that's a partnership of Fiat Chrysler, Ford, GM, some government agencies, some laboratories, private businesses, manufacturers, suppliers, and educational institutions. And basically, it's like a big think tank that gets together, and their goal is to advance important, socially responsible automotive issues related to energy, the environment, and safety. Now, they really do have more of a focus on the first two, because really their big push is for development of electronic vehicles and for increasing the efficiency of current automotive technology. But what if they were able to give more money for developing safety technology? I mean, that group right there, that's some big purse strings. So if they could actually dedicate more time and energy and money to developing technology, they could help everyone. So what are some ways that Illinois could potentially incentivize this kind of technology installed in vehicles? What if we had some kind of incentives that are similar to purchasing electric vehicles, where you get a subsidy for having these systems installed in your car, save you a little money off the top end. And it would help with the cost, because a lot of this tech is still really expensive. It's not standard on every model of car. What if we had a new plate category with a reduced cost that would identify a car as being a safe car or a smart car or something like that? And really, this comes down to the problem or solution, depending on how you look at it, depending on your perspective. Money talks. The safety tech really doesn't increase profit margins for Ford, Chrysler, Fiat, Dodge, any of those guys. It doesn't increase their profit margins. But it saves lives. So how can we get it to where this is standard and everybody's happy? It really is going to take a shift in perspective. Because honestly, with all of these things installed, you're going to have less injuries and deaths. You're going to have less accidents. You're going to have reduced costs across the board for insurance, for medical. So it's kind of, are you going to pay for it on the front end, or are you going to pay for it on the back end? So that's really where the shift in perspective has to happen. Okay, some other incentives. There are some that are existing now. You have programs through insurance companies. Safe driver discounts. You can take safety courses. Kind of Bob mentioned a little bit about that. There are sometimes help with your premium when you have certain technologies installed in your car. There's in-car data recorders that can track your driving and can give you a break on your premium if your driving habits are within whatever range they set. And I will say that last one, my dad tried that out and it cost him more money. So I don't really know what that says about my dad's driving habits. But that could, something like that, stories like that could hurt people's adoption of these kind of things. So if we could look at another angle using traffic and crash data, if we could partner with the tech companies that collect the data from our cell phones, that could help us potentially focus safety efforts in areas of high incidence. So let's say there's an area where, a rural area, and there is a high incidence of safety issues related to seatbelts, people not wearing seatbelts. They're out in the country, they all have big pickup trucks with bench seats, they don't like to buckle their seatbelt. What if we could use that information and use crash data that Illinois and the feds compile and find ways to target and focus our resources in that area so that we can be efficient with the way that we reach people that need to learn and change their habits. Now, there are companies that do these kind of things. They currently pay for this kind of data. Data aggregators is what they call them. That's how Google gets a lot of its information for its mapping software. Waze probably the same way. They're getting with AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and they're paying them for all this data. Well, would we be able to get this, since we're a government entity, would we be able to get it cheaper or for free if we're using it for these kinds of things? There could be privacy concerns with this for people that don't like to be tracked everywhere they go, people that like turn the location services off on their phones and things like that. So those are concerns, but if we could use this information, it could really help a lot of people. But it would also take probably an unprecedented amount of cooperation between multiple entities. You're talking government, private business, subcontractors, all sorts of different people that would have to come together to make this happen. And it probably wouldn't be the easiest thing to do. But how powerful would it be? And we need a lot of levels of detail to make this happen as well, which would take all those different groups working in concert to make it available in one place. And we talk about law enforcement and their role in reducing traffic fatalities. Jennifer kind of mentioned a little bit about how they work together to code accidents and to get statistics. But it would be really good if we could have an even more involved relationship with the Illinois State Police. In some of my research, looking on their website, they had a lot of outdated information on their website. They had a lot of dead links. There wasn't a whole lot of back and forth between their website and our website, or ours to theirs, to be perfectly honest. And their interface is pretty outdated. And we realize that Illinois State Police, their primary function isn't reducing traffic fatalities. They're a law enforcement agency. Their primary focus is to enforce laws, but they enforce our programs, which in some cases are laws. So it really does make sense that we would work together for a common goal. Some other partnerships that we could look at, sharing resources with other agencies. An example that we thought of was working with Secretary of State when somebody comes in to renew their driver's license. If my dad comes in and he's turning 68 and they see that his age pops up and a bunch of things come up on the person's screen that says, well, sir, do you realize that you can take part in this AARP Advanced Driver Program? That there's these programs available to you, these discounts you can get on your insurance if you do this. Once again, that would take a lot of cooperation between multiple agencies to make that happen. But if we could target the things that people need to help them be safer drivers right at that point, that would be powerful as well. And ultimately, we need to get out of our boxes. Our group's kind of a good example. 3 of us are from materials. I know very little about traffic fatalities, to be perfectly honest. I test asphalt, that's what I do. But everyone, just about everyone, drives on our roadways here in Illinois, one way or the other. So we all have skin in the game, and we all need to find ways that we can use our particular resources and our knowledge and our skills to work together to reduce fatalities to zero. So some final food for thought for you guys. If we truly believe that every life is worth saving, can you truly put a price on that? This isn't about a program, it's about people. It's about doing the right thing. It's about making sure that everyone makes it home safe and sound. This is where the rubber meets the road. Thank you guys for listening, and I'm going to bring my team up, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Anybody have any questions for us?
You guys had a lot of really good suggestions. In your opinion, is there one that is most effective or most beneficial for IDOT to look at right now?
I think a lot of the things we talked about, there's really a question. Is there anything that our group felt was kind of an important thing to focus on right now, like one particular thing? I think a lot of our ideas kind of work in concert. One of my thoughts, though, in listening when Bob first came up with his stuff, if you can have good habits early on, good driving habits early on, that potentially could eliminate a lot of issues down the road, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, but in response to what you were saying, like IDA, the driving education program is controlled by the Secretary of State. So the topic was how to reduce fatalities in the kind of took liberties in assuming that as we do work together on this program.
Tony,
I just have kind of a poignant question. So I always hear about the kind of pyramid of road safety is education, enforcement, and engineering. In your research, did you find that the state kind of utilizes more of the first two rather than the last one based on just the price alone?
that's that, and that's not really wasn't really a focus of our obviously. You restate that. So Russ is asking as far as the traffic safety pyramid, is that what you call it?
Yeah.
It's education,
And
enforcement, and engineering. If we focus more on the first two versus the last one. We didn't really get into specifics of the amount of money or attention we give to any of those specific ones. Essentially, our goal when we got this topic, I looked at what the traffic safety group had gone through, and I tried not to replicate too much of the things that they were currently looking at, because in case any of them came and they'd be like, well, yeah, we already did that. So some of it was to try to look at some things, some out-of-the-box things potentially, that people that are involved with that kind of stuff day to day might not necessarily think of, which is really what it was. So we didn't really get into a whole lot of like how much I really was spending in these areas.
And just to add that too, though, working in the material section, we see new products all the time. People send in, but just because you send in a new product doesn't mean that it meets our needs. So, you know, if we evaluate, we have a whole group that evaluates new products, and they look to see if it meets a spec already and how we better use it. And if it's something that looks like it's going to be beneficial for us, then there's work plans, there's field work studies. I mean, it's not like you don't just say, I've got the best thing ever, and say, all right, we'll do it. We put it to the test. It's got to perform. So,
Colleges are doing a lot of testing, like U of I does a lot of testing on new materials.
yeah. So, kind of depends on the engineering part that you're talking about. Like I said, as far as new materials, to me, I see a lot of new materials. They're not all of them are beneficial for us, so we still use them.
Laura, you had a question?
Yeah, I really understood that about 25% of the student drivers account for the fatalities. What is the breakdown? What other hotspots in the age groups? And did you guys look at how to address other hotspots? Because when it comes to the youth, basically they're a captive audience, and we can force them to take classes in school. We can limit their ability to get the licenses and to monitor as parents. So what other
traffic-related fatalities. Looking at the data is broken down by age, and I think the next highest age group was directly after 25, and then it trailed off into the 40s, and then increased as we got, I think, into the 60s. It went back up, which kind of makes sense. You know, you have the younger drivers who are inexperienced, and then they kind of trail off as you become seasoned. I was going to say older. Until, like you were saying, with the elderly drivers, they start to lose some of their faculties and might not be able to handle traffic situations as easily. As far as hotspots, other than age groups, I know that there was so many different ways that the data was broken down. I know that it did break down types of fatalities or causes, I guess. That was speeding was one of the but yeah, directly after 25 was the next highest group.
Yeah, and ultimately there was only 4 of us, and we had to pick an area to focus on. And one of the ways we did that was by looking at the task group and the things that they were focusing on. And a lot of those were the big, like Bob said, there were so many statistics that Jen was able to pull up that we could look at, broken down over different years, different age groups, different types. And the task force had really looked at a lot of those. And so we kind of had to pick areas that we try not to overlap too much, but also try to be relevant with some of the things that they were looking at as well.
So I guess what he's saying is the areas that we did focus on were kind of the hotspots that we chose.
So I have a question for Jim. You talked about the data collection. We have huge issues with ISP in terms of their accident reports. Do you have any suggestion of how they can become more standardized between the districts? Some of the districts, their stuff will be they'll be accurate, and in terms of an accident report or something like that, and the other ones, you're lucky if you're within a quarter of a mile.
So you're lucky what?
If they say where they say the accident is, when you go out to look at it, if they're within a quarter of a mile
Oh.
of where it actually occurred.
What you're asking is, that you see a lot of crash reports coming in from Illinois State Police and other local agencies, and you see a lot of mistakes on them, and they're not correct. You're wondering about the accuracy?
I'm wondering about the accuracy, and is there a way that we can get them all on the same page where they all fill it out the same way?
So he's wondering if there's a way to get all of the law enforcement personnel out there in our state on the same page. And a big thing that we talk about is training. These officers need training. We don't have anyone who's going out working with the law enforcement at this time due to people have retired, people have moved on to other jobs, and we are aware that they need training, and it is something that is being addressed. But we are very aware that locations are wrong on the reports, there's mistakes, they don't always give us a diagram, a narrative, sometimes they just write 9, which means unknown. They didn't even check to see whether or not the airbag's deployed, or they're wearing a seatbelt, or whatever. So we are aware of that problem. And the answer, we think, is training.
Anyone else have any questions?
Wondering if you guys had any statistics on the number of fatalities that involved tractor trailers in Illinois.
So you're wondering if we had any statistics on tractor trailer fatalities. I didn't see any in the research that we did. I don't remember that. I don't even remember seeing any about the vehicle types.
And it wasn't something we looked into.
They are there.
I'm sure the data is available.
Yeah, you just have to know the right place to look. Anyone else?
Yes, I got one more thing that I just kind of in your research, was there
question is, was there any kind of targeted campaigns for, like, say, a urban area versus like a rural area, something like that? There's so many campaigns out there, and we didn't really look at necessarily where they occurred, because looking at specific campaigns really wasn't one of the main focuses of the module that we were looking at, just outreach in general, and basically were those outreach methods effective. There might be some of that stuff out there, but that wasn't something that we looked at. Lauren, do you have another one?
Yeah, you talked about IDOT is going with other people and training more of the, like, as far as internally for our own personnel, what would you recommend, I guess, for IDOT doing its own part, its own personnel from a training or a safety equipment standpoint? Like what features should be in cars? What should we consider providing for our own people to kind of fall in line with this?
The question is, what can IDOT do to kind of help move the conversation forward as far as what we think would be beneficial for, like, say, technologies to be put in cars and things?
I'm talking about for our own staff.
For our own staff?
So not just going out for the public, what should we be doing to address our own part for our?
Okay, so what should IDOT do to protect our own employees while we're in, like, say, a state park on a job site? I think the presentation earlier today about highway maintainer training, I thought that was great, and that's, I mean, you think about the people that are out on the road, that's a large number of IDOT employees that are in harm's way. I know you spend a lot of time out in the field, you probably still do, and that's a concern. I've been on projects where we kind of had to grab a guy because he was backing up a little bit too close to a lane, or you pull off to the side, you go to get out of the car, and somebody's like right there zooming past you, even though there's traffic control right there. And I mean,
I know when the secretary came and he was talking to us, one of the things he mentioned in particular was leading by example. Like in safety zones, you know, if you're willing to be the guy who's going to drive 45 in that zone, even though you know it's 6 p.m. and there's nobody there, or you don't think there will be, leading by example, I feel like is important. You know, don't use your cell phone in the car. Everybody does it. Just don't be the one. Don't be that guy. You know, I think especially in the construction zones, if you're driving on an interstate, nobody's going the safety speed. You know, people going 80 miles an hour in those zones. But if they see state vehicles driving in those zones at those speeds, it doesn't look good. So leading by example, I would say, is a good step, an easy step.
Driving 45, 55.
Yes, you're going to get run over.
Yeah, driving after 45 miles an hour.
have any more?
I heard a lot about education, so what do you guys think about professional driving courses being mandatory for, we talked about a lot of this, about training, being trained, dates, times, getting people trained, and with my position, I have been a lot of communication from people about the education, so I love exposure about professional driving courses. So that's something that for our staff. We had to learn what we have once we start to certify as a driver, they have small courses, small groups of people certified as people over time.
So you're asking if we should have defensive driving courses at IDOT, would that be a benefit? I think that'd be great. It'd definitely be a step in the right direction in helping, starting with the source, the things we can definitely affect as a community.
It seems like when I started with the central office, before you were to take a state vehicle out, you had to have a
Say,
defensive
you
drive.
could be in class side.
There used to be one that was
20
offered,
years ago.
and then it went away, whether for staffing or for whatever reason, it's not, to me, that'd be super beneficial.
for anybody whose conditions of employment requires them to have a valid driver's license so that they can drive a state vehicle. I don't think it'd be a bad idea.
Education never hurts anybody.
Anyone else have any questions? Sure.
I was on the task force that you were talking about, and we looked at the fatalities from every angle. We looked at the causes and things like that, and then we gave our solutions to the Secretary of the Executive Staff. I'm just curious if, in looking at this, all these solutions you have, is there one cause that you might think that we don't look at enough?
So the question is there one big cause that we could look at as far as reducing fatalities? So like a big major contributing factor. I mean, probably distracted driving. I would say that's probably got to be the biggest one. As I said in my little portion, I can't go a day without seeing somebody driving, not stopping at a stoplight, doing this. And that scares the hell out of me. I'm not going to lie. Because I've seen plenty of people swerve because they're not paying attention. And how that can't be the top reason, I don't know what else would.
That's what we came up with.
Yeah.
That's a hard one to document though on your form, because were you messing with your phone? Ooh, I was both times we're on the road. I don't know what happened. I don't know how I ended up in that lane. It's
Well, that car just jumped out in front of you.
yeah.
Just to build on that slightly, I was at the Traffic Safety Summit in October, and that was something that the state police had said is very difficult to assess the distracted driving, as a cause. But I was wondering, when you're talking about putting features in cars, when you talk about your lane departure and the automatic stopping, I mean, for distracted driving, wouldn't that be something that would be of little cost, I guess, or little added cost to every vehicle to make that mandatory, where if you do have lane departure or something, it brings you right back, or, that kid or somebody drives out in front of you, your car automatically stops.
All right, so the question was, as far as distracted driving goes, could some of these technologies really help with that? And absolutely they could. And another funny thing I'll say about the Subaru, it's also got a warning on it that if you're sitting in a stoplight, like say looking at your phone, checking a text message, and the car in front of you moves from the red light, it will beep at you and tell you the car in front of you moved. So if that's just not saying that there's a problem with distracted driving, I don't know what does. But absolutely it could. But like any of these other things, these technologies are kind of a crutch. And as long as a human being is in control of that vehicle, they need to be fully in control of that vehicle. They need to dedicate 100% of their focus to driving. And that is really, really hard to do with everything that is in a vehicle. I mean, if you think about when the first car came out, I mean, it was probably hard enough just to keep it running versus worry about other distractions and everything. Because, it's probably steering it and everything, just trying to keep it straight. And now you've got satellite radio, and you've got your kid in the backseat yelling at you, and you've got the person behind you tailgating you, and there's all these things that you're having to try to pay attention to. And all of those things are just one distraction after another. And a lot of these technologies can help with the things that we can't control, but also keep in mind that our presentation was about, the big crux of it was avoidable causes. So things that we can avoid, so things that we can do to avoid getting in an accident to begin with, which if you can avoid the accident, then there's no fatality. You can't control the other guy, but if there's things that we can do to avoid the accidents in general, that's going to help.
Different toy with some phone tech that when you look at the phone, it would be on, and if you looked away, it would stop doing whatever, it would stop the movie or whatever, and it would be kind of ironic if you took that, put it into vehicles, and it would make an alert if you weren't focused on the road, if you look down on something, to take it from the phone and put it in the car instead. Then maybe that tech would be available down the road. I haven't seen them like that yet.
Didn't they have something like that? I don't remember what make it was or maker, but it was kind of a drowsy type. It would indicate when you're headed
It's
from
just
the
a
bomb.
matter of time before it can focus on your eyes and tell where you're looking, and then
And and there might be some on like luxury vehicles, like say BMWs or something like that. But a lot of these technologies still are fairly expensive. Because like say our Outback, if you got a basic model in the year we bought it, I think it was $3,000 or $4,000 or something like that. And if you're not willing to spend that money, we felt that it was going to be a good investment for us long term to do that. Especially my wife has, she's 41 years old, but has cataracts due to medication she took when she was younger. They're very slight, but she has problems with nighttime driving. So that car really made a lot of sense because that way I don't have to drive her everywhere at night because she's getting the star effect, every time a headlight comes at her. So these kind of things, for us it was worth it to spend the money. Somebody else, they might not be able to afford it. So until it gets to the point where that technology is essentially costing nothing to do, which will be there eventually, we'll be there eventually, like the airbags. I don't know how much airbags originally cost when they started putting them in cars, because they started actually putting them in cars in, like I said, the late 1960s, early 1970s. But the first car that I can remember that we had in was like a 1987 Voyager minivan that my parents had, and that was a big deal. I remember my dad talking about it. It's got airbags, and it's like, ooh, neat, As we put our cassette in, Phil Collins cassette in, driving, on our family vacations and stuff. But eventually we'll get there, for sure. But right now, it's still kind of a toss-up as to whether people feel it's worth it. Any other questions?